machines around by how it seems it needs to, it can be a little itchy, I think. Now, I'll tell you that there are environments all over the world that are using fully automated mode, and when they turn it on, it just works. So as long as you have your host, and you can guarantee that you have your host similarly configured, setting it to fully automated is a relatively safe thing to do. Now, when you do that, you have this little slider bar that determines which priority recommendations the DRS will actually implement in order to maintain balance. I like to think like DRS is one of those tables that only has one leg in the center. And each of the sides of the table corresponds to one of the hosts. And each host is going to have a certain weight to it that's associated with, well, how much stuff is trying to run on that host. And so if you think about it, you've got this sort of table that's trying to stay in balance. And I got one host over here that gets a little hot, and so the table, whoa, goes down into that direction. And maybe this one lightens up, and this one, the other one on the other side, starts to get a little hot because maybe there's a logon storm, or somebody sent out a big email to a bunch of people, and so, whoa, it's unbalancing this way. And so this table's always constantly trying to rebalance itself so it can sit on that leg in the center. Now, when we configure fully automated mode, DRS is fully empowered with which to make all those decisions on our behalf. When I set the migration threshold, this determines how big of a movement do I need to make in order for myself to get my table back in balance. Right, if I only turn on priority 1 or 1 and 2 recommendations, well, I'm only going to make the big moves that are about to make that table tip over. Right? And as I get more towards aggressive, I'm going to start applying the recommendations that maybe have a very much less of an impact on how balanced that table is going to be. So you kind of have to be careful here about whether you want to just worry about the big stuff or if you want to worry about the little stuff also, because each move there's a performance tax to it. There's a resource tax to it. A lot of us just leave it at 3 and run with it. I'm going to set mine for 3 because it's just, like I said, it's where most people set theirs. Now, DRS also has power management too. This is one of those technologies that not a lot of people use. Neat in concept, a little extra itchy in terms of how it might make you feel, but and really, arguably, you should almost never get to the point where you never need to turn it on, because that means you've overbought on hardware. The idea with power management is DRS's job is to distribute the load equally. Power management says, okay, while distributing equally, also try to consolidate onto as few servers as possible. So if my resource reservations for different virtual machines are such that I can consolidate them onto a smaller number of hosts, and in my 4-host cluster get to the point where only 3 of them are being used, well, why don't I just power off the extra host? Great if I've got 32 hosts in a cluster and I just overbought to prepare for the future. I can just turn this thing to power off, and it will automatically turn those hosts back on whenever the need arises for the resources that those hosts supply. A lot of us leave this turned off. The host has to support power management. They have to have, wake on LAN, IPMI, or ILO to power them on. Again, if you have to turn this on, you probably overbought when it relates to hardware, but that's okay. I'm going to leave this off at this point because you now know what you need to know associated with power management. HA, remember, HA is different from DRS in that HA is responsible for high availability. Its job is to protect against the loss of a host. To turn on HA, right, we have to check this checkbox here, enable host monitoring. Poof, it turns on HA. The second piece is this admission control. Now, it is entirely possible to turn on HA, but then to turn off all of the mathematics that determines whether or not you actually have enough resources or not. If I set this to disable, it will allow VMs to power on even if they violate availability constraints. Now, you got to be careful here. Remember our prototypical cluster. Not this one, but the other one, where I've oversubscribed my cluster, and so now I've got this host that fails, and I got nowhere for virtual machines to go. Now, what admission control does is it says, I'm going to be the traffic cop, and I'm going to say, no, you can't power on because I don't have enough resources available to protect myself in the case of a failover. Some people, some admins, will turn on HA